Hi everyone. I think we're live. It looks like we're live. Hi everyone. Hi Chris and Sarah. How you doing?
How you
Good,
doing?
thank
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing really great to have you with us here today. Um, I can see we've already got some people popping into the audience by the looks of things. Um, Everyone who's watching, if you want to say hi, let us know where you're from. I'm currently joining from Oxford at the moment, and it's very rainy outside. Um, where are you two joining us from at the moment?
I'm in Austria at the moment, and it's beautiful. I don't want to depress you, but it's just utterly gorgeous. But I'm not sure that's going to make me popular to tell you that, is it?
Oh
It's
no, I'm
not
jealous
not
now. I'm
popular.
jealous.
I'm similar to you, Chris. It's gloomy Dublin, but it's a nice gloom. It's a nice late autumnal gloom.
It's a
Um,
Dublin gloom.
it's our typical weather.
Dublin gloom is definitely a lot nicer than English gloom. I find it
I
has
don't know.
a different
Helen,
quality to it.
Helen, I'm very surprised it's not raining in Yorkshire. I'm originally from Lancashire, just over the other side of the hill, so it's always raining there. But
Mm.
Helen said it's not raining in Yorkshire. Well, that's a first.
Ah, it probably
It
will soon.
We've also
looks
got
like
Anne from Ukraine. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Egypt.
looks like
Hello
we've got
again.
some people from all over the place. Actually,
Gosh,
Wow.
what a mix. How fantastic. Look at all these people from all over the place.
really great to have you all here with us, everyone. It looks like we've got quite a few people in the audience by now, so I'm gonna kick us off.
Wow.
So yes, how's everyone doing? As I said, say hi and let us know where you're joining from in the comments. We love to hear from you and know whereabouts in the world you're from. We're really excited to have you here with us today to celebrate the launch of our latest position paper on self-directed professional development. This paper offers a complete guide to help teachers take control of their learning and development. It's filled with practical advice and resources to help you set your learning objectives, learn what's relevant and meaningful to you, apply it in the classroom, and really make sustainable, long-term improvements to your everyday teaching and practice. So this paper's brand new, just launched today. Sarah and Chris are two of the people behind it. It's a fantastic paper. I think it's one of our best ones so far. You guys did a really great job with it.
Thank you.
And yeah, if anyone wants to download it, it's on our website right now. We've just uploaded it, and there should be a link in the comments for you to jump on that. So yeah, feel free to go and get that. But for now, I'm joined by Chris and Sarah, who are here to celebrate the launch of this paper with us. And yeah, Chris and Sarah, would you tell everyone a little bit about yourselves, I suppose?
Yeah, I'll start if I may, Chris. I'm
Yeah, of
Sarah.
course.
I'm originally from the UK, but I've lived in Austria for nearly 30 years. I work at the University of Graz, and I'm in charge of the English language teacher education program here in Graz. And it's been a joy to work on this paper. It's been real fun. It's been a big professional development experience for me as well, and I've thoroughly enjoyed working with both Chris and Donald.
Oh, that's positive. I'm Chris. My role is Head of Training and Development with an organisation called Centre of English Studies. We're based in Ireland, the UK and Canada. So my job is mainly not only working with the teacher development in the centres, but also designing the training courses for external teachers, which we host. And I really enjoyed working on this paper. My main motivation was to be able to get a chance to work with Sarah and Donald, and it's just been so educational for me. It's kind of a guilty thing that I've learned so much from it. But yeah, so I'm enjoying it.
Great. Well, thanks you both for joining us. It's great to have you here with us. And what you're saying about learning a lot from the paper, I think there's one of the appendices at the end that I read, which is all about you guys writing about your experience of creating this paper and how you developed from it. I found that really interesting. And the paper as a whole, really great paper. And yeah, we're going to talk about it with all of you in the audience a bit today. So just to introduce myself, I'm the other Chris on here. If at any point Sarah says Chris and we both respond at the same time, sorry about that. It'll probably happen at least once. But I'm responsible. I work for OUP and I'm responsible for delivering a lot of the professional development content to all of you guys, including all of our papers. And I'm currently organizing a bunch of events and resources to help you get more out of our professional development. And I'll tell you all about that a bit later in the talk. For now, as I mentioned earlier, for those of you just joining, this paper's just launched, and there's a link down in the comments, which you can click on if you want to download it. We're going to answer all your questions today, but it gives loads of information and a really in-depth framework of how to do PD and get the most out of PD. Really flexible. So if you want that, go and get it. But yeah, for now, Chris and Sarah are going to talk to us a bit about why professional development is important, how you can take control of your learning journey, and more. So if you've got any questions for us at any point, just pop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them. There seems to be a lot of you here. So, you know, if we don't get to your questions, we'll come back to them at the end. But yeah, feel free, fire any questions you have at us and we'll do our best to answer them. So to get started, Chris and Sarah, I'm going to put you guys on the spot right away. Also, with these questions, anyone in the audience, if you have thoughts on anything or you want to respond, do let us know. Because the first one, I think you'll all have opinions about. So Chris and Sarah, the first question for you. Why is professional development important for teachers and what can teachers get out of it?
You said there was going to be easy questions. Why is professional development important? Well, I guess first we start off with say professional development is important, not just for teachers. It's important across a number of different sectors. You know, lifelong learning, learning on the job. But I think particularly for people working in the education sector, we do see a huge amount of changes in our practices, changes in the type of students we're dealing with, and keeping an eye on your own professional well-being, I suppose, would be the number one focus on actually thinking about your own lifelong learning and your own journey, and how fulfilling it should be as a motivator, rather than saying it's good because you might get a promotion or anything like that. Actually, that idea of motivation, the intrinsic motivation you might get from improving and bettering yourself, I think is the main driver. I don't know if Sarah would agree or disagree.
Yeah, I'd agree very strongly that I think sometimes professional development is positioned as being about what you can do better for your learners. But actually, this is very much about what teachers themselves can benefit from it, because it's actually, you know, it's just pleasurable to learn something new, try something out. It keeps you fresh. It helps you to get new perspectives on the familiar things that you do. So I think professional development, yes, it's going to benefit your learners and your teaching practice, hopefully. But it's very much also about you as an individual, that it's a fun thing to do. It can be interesting under the right conditions, which we're going to get to later. But it can be a very positive area of growth and motivation. And it's good for your well-being in your job so that you keep feeling fresh and enjoying it.
There's one, I suppose, Chris, there's one other point you should make, and it's something which is perhaps controversial in the area, is that you don't have to. You know, it shouldn't be an obligation for you, and certainly it shouldn't be something which you're under pressure to do. If there's other things going on in your life, it should be fulfilling. And if it becomes such an extra thing and a stress, then you know you need to take back. And it shouldn't be something which you're made to do. You know, unless it's retraining for something like that.
And I think actually that comes to a really good point, which I think is that for teachers, the reason behind their professional development should be their choice.
Yeah.
Like it can be to improve your skills and knowledge. It can be for your own well-being. It can be if you're gunning for that promotion and you want to get that promotion. For that, I think it's about defining your own learning journey in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody's different, and you know, everyone's circumstances are different, and it changes over time. So sometimes you're just so busy and stressed doing what you're doing in your everyday life that you can't think about any additional things. And then sometimes you've got that little bit of extra capacity and you think, I'd just be curious to know a little bit more about that. I'd like to explore that. And I think one of the things that we were very keen to do in the paper was to also broaden our understandings of what professional development is.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that allows for a much wider scope than traditional understandings of what falls into professional development, perhaps. I think Khaled says in the comments, is, you know, PD about updating skills and knowledge? That's one thing that it can be. So one thing that you can do is you can update your skills, update your knowledge, but also sometimes it's if you've got something that you're just curious about or something that you've been struggling with. It can be a whole range of motivations, and there's lots of different ways of going about it.
And sorry, if you look at the institutional perspective on, why should a school or a university encourage this type of thing, the school culture that a group of teachers involved in their own focusing on their own well-being and focusing on their own interest in teaching is such a positive thing. That reciprocal vulnerability of everybody actually asking questions and seeking information and doing their research activities, which we've looked at in the paper, is very valuable for the school, for the students, for everybody.
This is a great question that Helen Moe has asked. A great question. This is actually what we hope the whole point of the paper is. Yeah. The whole ethos of self-directed professional development is that you decide on your terms how you're going to structure this and how you're going to try and get the most of it, so that it meets your needs and it fits with your motivation, your drive. So I'm hoping that it's exactly that the paper is trying to address, is tailoring professional development so that it isn't stressful. It's not, as Chris said, an additional burden, one more thing you have to do, but that it's something meaningful and fulfilling because you're able to select and tailor it to suit you, your circumstances, your resources, your time, and so on.
Yeah. And just to further on that, Khalid, it's exactly that, not thinking about abstractions, but actually meeting the needs that you might have in your own context and meeting them at your level, not just thinking about the complex pedagogy or anything like that, just thinking how can you solve certain problems perhaps. But Khalid, you might have to go read the paper. It has all the answers.
So I'm just going to jump into another question. Sorry, I accidentally clicked on a comment there, which we'll come back to. I meant to save it for later rather than popping it up. Yeah, I think one of the points you're both making, which I think is really important, is that it's all about teachers having autonomy and control over their development and being able to choose their path and what professional development really means to them. So I think one of the important questions I wanted to ask right near the start, which is very broadly, and I know this is a big question, what can teachers do to take control of their professional development and make sure they're developing in a way that is sustainable and effective? How can they make sure that they're taking a structured approach that works for them? How can they make sure that they are in control, that they have the autonomy?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Like with everything, it depends. It absolutely depends on their context, depends on their context of teaching. It depends on the institution they teach and the colleagues they have, their experience. It depends on a massive amount of things. But I guess what we could look at it to reframe it slightly is not to think of professional development as being product based, like you have to reach that level, you have to do that thing, but actually being process based, and that you're just by inquiring and engaging, you are, involved in your own development in some sort of way. So the idea of you're going to take control and you're going to put yourself on this path to linear progress is perhaps not that realistic. Obviously, it's how we see the competency frameworks, but exactly, it's a process. And what we're trying to do is make teachers feel more secure, make their lives easier, actually. And anything you can do as part of your PD, which makes you feel less stressed or makes you enjoy your profession a little bit more, that's the control that you're going to get, rather than going up the scales of something, I would say. Sarah?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think one of the things that we do in the paper is we give some ideas of what you can do to take control and decide and make decisions yourself. But we're also very aware that sometimes you might be forced to engage in PD that you didn't choose, but that your institution or your local education authority thinks is a good idea. And we've also got a section where we say, okay, so based on an idea that we've taken from occupational psychology, there's something called job crafting. And job crafting is the idea that you take what you have to do and you craft it. So you make little changes to suit it you as best you can. So we've also tried to make some suggestions that even if you have to go to PD that's prescribed, you have no choice in that matter, there are still things you can do. You can focus what you take out of it. You can focus who you work with, maybe. You can maybe choose how you follow up on certain things. So we've also sort of added things that if you have got prescribed PD, what kind of crafting, tweaks, changes can you exercise to make it suit you a little bit better. And then, of course, the bulk of the paper is about how you can direct your own PD, how you can, as Chris and Fatima, I think it was said, how you can craft that journey.
And of course, this paper has an appendix with a number of different practical tasks, which, you know, for step one, what you can do, and different framework tasks where you can begin to take those first steps and take some sort of control over a certain journey in a certain context, which might work for some people in their own context. And that's what I would suggest. If you've really the blank slate of nothing to do, go to the back of this this paper, have a look at one of the tasks, and just try it out. And that's part of your process, isn't it?
Yeah, I really like those tasks. I've so as a separate thing that I'm doing at the moment, I've been asked to add some resources to one of our conferences, and one of the things I'm doing is adapting one of those for that. So they're just really fantastic exercises that are quite straightforward, I find. We just had Lisa ask, she's just joined, where can she find the paper? So Lisa, you can find a link to the paper down in the comments. So if you want to grab that, just scroll through, it'll be there somewhere. There's so many comments. I had some questions I wanted to ask you guys, but there are so many comments already that I think we're just going to jump straight into answering people's questions, because everyone seems really interested. So I think we
did that one, yeah.
That. So yes, we've got one here from Nadia. How can teachers be able to develop their teaching skills and approach to meet the needs of students according to the development of 21st century skills?
Yeah, I got it. I can.
Let's do that one.
So there's a couple of things in there you need to define, I suppose. The concept of 21st century skills, which I'm guessing you're thinking of things like digital literacy. So what we would have to do is, obviously, and again, I'm going to answer every question with it depends on your context, but it's understanding your students, understanding your curriculum, understanding the limitations of the opportunities in your context. But the first thing you absolutely need to do is what are the needs of your students? Because and I mean in terms of language needs, and also in terms of world needs or life needs, because the 21st century skills is something which is going to be integrated into language knowledge. It's not going to be something which is completely independent. So if we're doing something like digital literacy, it would be integrated into a typical language lesson. And that would require, if we look at your professional development, would require you researching certain online tools that people are using for language learning and thinking, how can I utilize this tool in my classroom? So it's not just an easy step. It involves defining what the skills are, researching that in terms of your first person research and doing it yourself, and then beginning to think, how can I integrate it into my normal practice so it begins to modify and redefine how I'm actually delivering my lessons and how my students are engaging with them.
I don't think Chris Robson's going to complain if I say perhaps we could recommend at this point the global skills paper might be.
I was about to say the exact same thing. Got there first. Yeah, we have another paper which Sarah also worked on global skills, and it's another really great paper. If you follow the link to the professional development paper, there should be a link on that webpage at the very top. And if you click that, it'll go back to our homepage where all of our papers are. It's so just to go straight to that homepage, it's www.oup.com/ELT/expert, and that has all of our papers on it. So if you want the global skills paper, go there. Really great stuff in that. So yeah, hopefully you find it useful. I'm just going to find another question because we've got loads of interesting ones. I think there was one I found really interesting from Fatma about I'd like to ask how we can overcome stress and pressure at work to avoid arguments that affect our performance.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Sarah question.
Yeah, my goodness, that's an epic question, Fatma, and I'm sorry that you experienced that at any point. I suppose that when you're looking at things that are causing you stress, you've got two ways of doing it. You can look at what you can do to minimize that stress, or what you can do to protect yourself against that stress. So there's what we call sort of preventative measures, where you take action to prevent yourself being in that situation. So you to do things in advance. If this happens, I'm going to do this. You prepare strategies to protect yourself. And then the other way is that if that stressor has occurred, whatever the situation is, you take time to reflect on what options do I have to react. I think it's important not to just react out of instinct. Sometimes the emotional response is stronger, and it's best just to step back and give your emotions time to cool down a little bit. And then you can look at what options do I have? How can I respond to this? So prevention is always better than cure. If you can find ways to avoid these situations arising in advance, that's always going to be a good way to do that. And I think for most issues to do with professional development and professional relationships, dialogue is very important. If you can find an opportunity to have clear and open communication where everybody feels comfortable and honest about sharing how they feel about things, without the hot emotions involved, that's going to open up more pathways of action for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. And exactly what Sarah said, it's the removal of friction factors which might cause conflict, and how you can minimize potential conflicts. It's not always possible, but you can prevent, I suppose, this type of thing. Yeah.
Mm.
But
And also, just to apparently we're on a set of questions which allows us to continually promote Sarah. Sarah's written a book on I'm not doing this on purpose, I promise. Sarah's written a book on teacher well-being, which is fantastic. I really like it. And if you download the paper, I think we send everyone an email with a link to the paper, and it also contains a link to that book, and a lot of the resources around it. So yeah. If you download the paper, you'll get a link to that as well, and it's great for this sort of thing, for dealing with stress. Do you guys mind if I jump to another question? Because
yeah.
So there's actually two questions from Khaled, which I think are interesting side by side, because I think you guys can say similar things about them. So the first one was I don't like paying money, and I don't have, and I need to know where to go for CPD. And then the second one is, do I need a coach? So I think there's these questions around, do you need mentorship, and do you need paid professional development?
Well, the simple answer is no for both.
Yeah.
Just to make life easy, the simple answer is no. No, you
Yep.
don't need to pay, and no, you don't need a coach. But Chris, do you want to pick one of those ones, and I'll answer the other one?
Yeah. So just in terms of the coach, I'll look at the mentoring element of it, because what now I don't know what you might need, but what I would say might be more beneficial than having somebody who can coach you along, which would cost money, is having peers who would act as sounding boards or support you. And these peers might not even be your colleagues. It could be an online community. I know there's a lot on different social networking sites. There's a different online teaching communities. But it might just be somebody that you need to bounce ideas off, that you actually verbalize your ideas, because that's really the first step, is to verbalize your beliefs and to have them challenged or questioned or agreed with, might be the first step, rather than going all the way to the last point and thinking about a coach. Begin that process of a professional learning network would be my suggestion. Yeah.
And I think that's a great suggestion. That also links into what's free, is that there are so many communities online that you can join. I mean, look at this. This is free. The tool is free. The papers are free. There's a lot of opportunities. I think that's one of the joys of these social networking sites, and also the internet, is it provides a lot of opportunities for you to meet other people, share ideas, and don't be afraid to reach out to people. I tend to find that teachers are an incredibly generous, friendly community. And so if you say, I'm struggling with this, does anybody have any ideas of how I could do this? You will always get replies in these online forums, social groups, social networking groups, and so on, and also in forums like this. So I think there's plenty of resources available online, and also a whole community of brilliant teachers with lots of experience in all different settings.
Yeah.
And they're the perfect people to connect with, to support each other. And that's also learning and professional growth.
And I think one of the things which these two questions made me think of is that I think it's always worth acknowledging that every teacher has access to different sets of resources.
That's right, yeah.
Some countries, they teach, the schools get support for professional development. Some institutions provide support, some don't. Some people have more time than others. I imagine any teachers with kids have less time to do professional development. And we all have different commitments, we all have different resources. And I think one of the important things is acknowledging that there are ways to do PD no matter what resources you have. And it's about using the resources you do have. You don't have to do paid PD. I mean, we have the ELT online conference happening next month, which has loads of different webinars. So there's lots of free resources, and it's about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And I think in the paper, I think in chapter 2 of the paper, we have a framework of 7 steps. And I think the first one of that is about reflecting on your own. I think the first thing we recommend you do is reflect on where you are, what resources you have, and which things are going to be suitable for you.
And something as simple as that, and I guess I want to stress again, is don't feel under pressure. If you are overworked, you don't have to do PD, and it doesn't have to be a big formal thing. It can be literally something as walking out of class and thinking, was that the right thing to do, or should I have done that, or should I beginning to question justifying choices in your classroom? Keep it simple.
So one of the things that we say, I just had to go to the other screen to look at it to make sure I've got all the things right, is we've got when you're selecting what you might want to engage with in terms of PD, obviously you have to look at your resources. So what you've got in terms of resources, what support you've got, how much time you've got, whether something is going to cost something or not. You look at the purpose of what you want to achieve. This is if you're being very deliberate about this now. What do you want to achieve? What's the purpose of this for you? And it doesn't have to be sort of an explicit goal for others, but what you want for yourself. And what would you enjoy? And I think that's quite, the enjoyment side of things is quite an important thing to stress, is that it's nice if you can enjoy this. Is this something that should be pleasurable, and that you can enjoy doing some of this kind of maybe reading group. One of my student groups that I work together with, we take it in turns to choose an article that's available online freely or a website. And every month we meet and we have a coffee and a chat and we talk about it. We talk about what we took out of it and how we see it. And that's a lovely thing to do, that it's pleasurable. It's a social event, but it's also got an element of discussion and learning in it.
And also, even if you're not the one that's bringing the ideas, just by listening to someone and even questioning their beliefs, you're also ingraining that into yourself, and you're also beginning that reflective inquiry that you need, I suppose.
I think that's a really good point, that very much that we've been stressing all throughout. It's that interaction is really where a lot of learning happens. And we've also been talking a lot about sort of time pressures and restrictions. And I want to jump in on a specific example. We may have already answered some of this, but Helen has asked if there are any tips for teachers who want to reflect on self-directed learning, but don't have time for keeping a full journal or doing the full in-depth process.
Yeah, I have it. So Helen, I've encountered this problem a lot, and it just is not in some people's habit to actually sit down and reflect. So what we sometimes do is voice notes there's loads of different apps you can use, but we use Vocaroo, which is Vocaroo, and it just allows you to record your voice, and it saves as a link and you can share it. And what a lot of teachers have is created a Google document with the date, and they just share the link in there so they can go in and actually listen back when they're on the bus or on the train or whatever to some of their reflection. And actually verbalizing it's a little bit more natural, because it's almost like we're having a conversation. And it also allows us to, when we're using the little links, if we're having a professional development group of people sharing together, we can share some of the reflections and have conversations around some of the reflections. So they're really useful as long-term developmental tools for reflection 6 months later and stuff like that, more so than paper, which tends to get lost. That's a little bit of a time saver. I've certainly found that it's more people have done it because it's on recording rather than paper. That's all I have, Helen. Sorry. That's all I got.
Sorry, I was elsewhere because I was trying to address a comment someone had. No, I think that's a really good answer, and that really goes into a lot of depth. There was another question which popped up. Sorry, I'm reading all of these and they're really great. I think this is actually a really interesting one. So Samia says she learns a lot from these communities, such as these online events, but the people around her don't consider it as PD. And how do you address this? Because I think actually this can be quite common in some places.
Show them the paper. Show them the paper that we've written and say, look, Oxford consider it PD. Yeah, Sarah, do you want to?
Samia, I think this is a huge problem, and this is part of the motivation behind writing this paper. Quite honestly, Samia, is one of our agendas is that we would like to broaden people's notions of what counts as professional development. Things have changed. It doesn't have to be centralized. It doesn't have to be government mandated for people to actually learn and grow. And you're absolutely right, Samia. When you're in these communities, you learn an enormous amount. I love being in some of these online communities and find that I probably learn more there than I do anywhere else at the moment. And one of our sort of targets, one of our purposes in writing this paper was we would like to try to open the discussion about what counts as professional development and start to encourage people, institutions, policymakers, leadership to broaden what they understand as professional development, and also start respecting teachers' expertise, in that teachers themselves know what is good for them, what they need in their context, and what they find interesting and feel that they're going to benefit from. So, Samia, I think you're actually bang on the mark, and it is definitely not only you. I think that's a problem generally, and that's exactly what we want to address with this paper. We feel quite strongly about it.
And I think I thought that was a great answer, Chris. Show them the paper.
It's official now. It's official.
It is exactly. It's our official stance. You can tell them that we told you. Blame us. There are a couple other questions in here which I wanted to jump to, but before jumping to the questions, I just wanted to highlight there are some people in the comments who are giving some really great suggestions. So Lisa has a big comment which I'm just going to flash up for a second because it's hidden Chris's face.
I can yawn now. I can relax.
And then there's others. Chris has gone into the paper and found lists of activities on page 10.
Thank you.
So yeah, just really great to see everyone in the comments really going into this, and I think this is
that's exactly it. This is what learning communities do. Is what Lisa and Chris are doing in the comments box is they're sharing resources and ideas with each other, and that's what we want to encourage. Is that we're here to help each other. We're all in this together. We all have different circumstances and different conditions, but it's a great opportunity to share ideas with each other and resources.
Absolutely. I have another question for you guys, but beforehand, I want to answer Sanjeev's question. She's asking whether Oxford provide online courses in PD free of cost or not. Yes, we do. We provide loads. The big one, I would really recommend our ELT online conference, LTOC. It happens 4 times a year, every 3 months. And we get loads of great speakers like Chris and Sarah there to talk about loads of different ideas like assessment, global skills, independent learning. So really the full package. So I would highly recommend that. And then also we do have a website with access to loads of free PD content if you join our Oxford Teachers Club. I'm just going to pop this in the comments. Let's see if this comes through. Okay, I've just popped a link in the comments to our professional development website. That should be down there. And if you click on that, that'll link you to all of our free professional development resources. So yeah, I hope you find that useful.
And Cherry even says, "I love LTOC."
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. I'm glad to hear it. I love LTOC too. LTOC is great. Okay, so to jump to some more questions rather than just promoting LTOC, Anna has asked, and I think this is a really interesting one. Are there any PD resources you would recommend for experienced teachers, since we might get too comfortable with our instructional practice?
Do you know, there's loads of resources, obviously, and you can go to the Oxford website. I often find your classroom is the best resource, to be honest, and that idea of reflective inquiry and evidence seeking in the classroom is going to be more it's going to be as beneficial than watching a video, than reading a paper. And I think engaging in stuff like experimental practice, and you can find tips on experimental practice or even action research if you want, but actually focusing on your interests or your needs within a classroom context, seeking evidence from a colleague who might observe you, or your own students. I think that's a massively underused resource that I'd love to see people use more. Perhaps you're already doing that, Anna. So that was just my first thoughts there.
And I think, Anna, also, one of the things I do is I'm very lucky that some of the colleagues I work with share great ideas. If they say, I've tried this out, and just experimenting with new stuff, trying out new ways of doing things. So one of the things I tried out not long ago was to stop having me ask questions of my learners and make the learners ask the questions of each other. So I could start the first question, and then it would go like they'd pass the questions on to each other, and the students would question. And boy, was that interesting. I mean, it made me see the class in a different way. It made me see the kind of things learners were listening to or paying attention to differently. It also meant I got to hear from more learners in the class than I would usually do, when I'm not just relying on the ones that always respond. So there's little things you can do, and even as an experienced teacher like yourself, there's little things you can just try out and see how it goes. And then suddenly you discover you're doing something a bit new. You're doing something a little bit different to what you usually do.
On that, actually, Sarah, just in terms of things we've tried this year, and it might be useful to Anna. Something I tried for the first time this year was getting students to write their classroom notes into Google Document. Again, I don't get paid for Google Documents, but actually even doing that for a week and getting them to share the documents into the classroom, you can see what classroom notes people took in terms of what they took from your lesson versus what you hoped they had taken from your lesson. And it was really useful insight into what different students sitting beside each other took as the key information from the lesson. It was quite eye-opening and allowed me to tailor my presentations a little bit better, I think.
So we have another one popped up. Actually, before we jump to the next one, there was one thing that you said about reflecting on what you're doing and reflecting on trying new things. And I just wanted to highlight one particular resource in the appendices, which I thought was really fantastic, which was a page that I think it was number 4, that had a really structured approach for doing this reflection. It's a one-page table that allows you to write down what you're taking away from PD, put that into actions to take in the classroom, and then lists questions for you to consider afterwards to think whether it worked. And it's a sort of activity which you can do in a really short amount of time to just try something new.
Yeah. And that's it. And it is all part of that process rather than product. I mean, you might do a PD activity and reflect upon it, but it's not going to go anywhere. But it was interesting, and and it's allowing you to do that as quickly as possible. Yeah.
And I think that's the point, is that everybody will go about this a little bit differently. And that whether you choose to make it a bit more formal or you choose to do it a little bit more informal. I think, in fact, one of the comments here at the end, Fräulein, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, has put it really nicely, is that for some, just talking to a colleague is enough. Yeah. And for others, they want something more formal in a more structured environment. And that's what the paper is trying to encourage, is that whole spread of reflecting on these different ways that you can approach PD. And depends on who you are and what you need at a particular moment in time. If you've got a particular issue that you want to understand more, you might choose the more formal option. And if you're just, as Anna said earlier, in a little bit of a rut and you just want to do a little bit of exploring, you might go off and do something a little bit more informal on your own. Just depends where you're at and what you need at a moment in time. And hopefully the paper gives all those kind of options space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
So I'm gonna jump us to another question, because they keep flooding in. Really, thanks everyone for asking these. I'm learning loads of new things here, just because you're all coming from such different directions. So really great to have you all commenting and getting involved. There's a question here. And there was another question similar to it earlier, which I think is interesting, which is, how can we come to know that one is professionally developed? What are the indicators? And I think one thing to stress is what we said earlier about how it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something interesting in here about monitoring your own progress and development.
Yeah. So what we would do, and it really depends on the context you work in, is we would use a competency framework. And as far as I understand this, there's 50 or 60 different competency frameworks in operation just in Council of Europe countries. So it's quite a minefield. We use the shortest competency framework we could find, which is the Equals Teacher Development Framework. It's EAQUALS. And that is a 3-level competency framework, which allows you to reflect upon where you are in certain categories on certain levels. So all we have done is taken that document. It's not a long document, it's free as well, and turned a lot of the competencies into questions, reflective questions, which is quite an easy task to do. So the teachers can begin to reflect upon their competency at that level, look at the next level and see the competency there, and begin to, it's not about grading or linear progress. You just begin to inquire about where you are and where you want to go, and things like that. Similar to that, we sometimes use the European Profiling Grid, which is the EPG, which is another framework of competencies. But these are all, they're not rules. It's all just reflective, reflective purposes, structured reflection, I suppose.
So in the paper, one of the things that we've also done is we've provided 2 ways of looking at areas where you might want to consider whether you want to develop further. So we've got one area where we look at the kind of attitudes, values, knowledge and skills that a teacher has. And then we've also looked at the topic areas, so different aspects of being a professional, because one of the things we wanted to stress was that professional development is not just what happens in the classroom, but it's part of your whole professional practice. And particularly given my own interest, that well-being is part of that professional development. So we also provide those two approaches to asking yourself questions about, are there areas where I might want to find out more? Are there areas where I feel very confident? Are there areas where I feel like I'd like to find out a little bit more? And we hope that that might be a way to help guide you towards areas that you might want to follow up. And I think I would just also stress is we never get to an end state. You're never finished. None of us. You never get to an end state where you say, right, I've got it all now, because we change, our learners change, circumstances change, new tools become available, and so and I think for many of us, that's one of the joys of being a teacher is you're never finished learning. There's always something new to explore and to find out about, and I think that whole being able to keep learning for the whole of your professional life is actually an incredibly motivating part of being a teacher.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think a really clear example of that is, approaching 2.5 years ago now, when everything changed at once for everyone, and we all had to learn a completely new approach. And I think Nadia has a question similar to this. Oh no, that wasn't one below Nadia. So we have a question asking, how can we design a professional development in response to a change of curriculum caused by new curriculum issued by Ministry of Education? But I think there's a broader question here related to the pandemic, which is when circumstances change, whether it's ministry stuff, whether it's, a pandemic, whatever it is, how can we design professional development around that?
Yeah, well, the first thing we always focus on is the needs of the teacher. So what does the teacher need in order to achieve success in that context? And everything is going to flow from that. What are the needs of the students? What are the, we have in the paper the SWOT analysis you can do. What are the strengths and the weaknesses, and what opportunities and threats are provided by this change? And it really is that management of change, which is filtering all the way down. So we can keep the same activities, but it's going to have a slightly different focus based on the needs, if that makes sense. So that would be the first step I would do. How have the needs of the teacher changed because of this change in curriculum? Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's a good response, is that when you're looking at any kind of change in circumstances, it's like when you plan any teaching session, you look at what resources you have, what the needs of the learners are, what your needs are as a teacher, and what resources are available. And if something changes in any of those points, you have to reassess, and you have to reconsider, okay, have I changed? Have my learners changed? Have our resources, our materials changed? And how can I adapt my teaching? So I think it's that famous triangle of what's involved in teaching, and you look at those resources, you look at your resources, your teaching resources, your learners, and you look at what adaptations you need to make.
Yeah.
So I think needs analysis on all those levels is always a good, needs and means analysis is always a good guide.
That makes sense. And speaking of identifying needs, there's a good segue here. Khaled has asked, how do I pinpoint areas where I do need professional development?
Well, this goes back to competency frameworks. And as I said before, the one that we use, but if you Google teacher competency frameworks, there's almost certainly one from your country. We use the equals one, and it has a set of descriptors, competency descriptors at each level, and for you to go in and see and to reflect upon them as questions. But that's where I would start.
As well as starting in our paper, which has reflection questions about
after the paper.
After the paper, in the paper, there's also questions that will help you reflect on your different areas that you might want to improve on, and different aspects of being a teacher that you might want to just work a little bit more on. So we hope that might also be covered by the paper.
Yeah, and I think those reflection questions, they're spread throughout the paper, but also if you download it and you go right to the very end, one of the appendices has all of the reflection questions on a single page. And a useful activity, if you're pressed for time, could just be, right, I'm going to take one set of these to do with, okay, what are my needs, where do I want to develop, and I'm just going to spend 15 minutes thinking about them.
Yeah.
Or you could
if you look on pages 19 and page 20, that's where we've got the values, attitudes, knowledge and skills bit, and the topic areas. So they are two tables where you can deliberately look at, okay, how do I feel about these different aspects of my professional competencies? And are there any areas that I'd like to do a little bit of work on, or any areas that I'm just interested in exploring? Well, I think maybe that's something we haven't mentioned that perhaps is worth emphasizing at this point is professional development doesn't have to be about deficit needing improving. I think that's really important to stress, and maybe we haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. It can just be a question of, as Chris talked earlier about, investigating what you do, trying to understand better what's happening in your own practice. It can just be the fact you're really interested in something and you just want to know more about it. Or you can even have, let's say you have a brilliant lesson where everything goes fantastic. You can deconstruct that and say, okay, why did that go so well today? Why was that a particularly good lesson? And are there lessons I can take from that to transfer to other situations? So professional development doesn't have to be this view of there's a problem, there's something that needs improving, there's something. Teachers are brilliant and doing brilliant stuff every day. We can build on that and transfer it to other sections. We can come to understand what causes success and what causes those brilliant lessons where we walk out doing a high five saying, this went really well. So I think that was something else we wanted to stress, is that the reasons people engage in professional development can be because they want to explore strengths. They want to explore things that are going well. They want to just find out more about something they're curious about.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, so it's quite funnily enough, we at OUP, we do our own professional development, and one of the things we really focus on is rather than looking at weaknesses in areas which you need to improve, what are you good at and how can you get better at it? And it's a very strength-led approach, which I think can be very interesting.
I think it's fantastic. So this whole notion is, so it comes in occupational psychology, and in business, it comes from something called appreciative inquiry. And it's something we talk about in the teacher wellbeing book. So appreciative inquiry is about establishing strengths, appreciating what you do well, what is going well, what is successful, but also understanding why it's successful or what those strengths mean, and then thinking about how we can use them in different situations, how we can build on our strengths and build on our successes. And that's something I would like to see much more of in education generally, is not always having the deficit problem approach, but actually looking at strengths and success and building on that and transferring that.
It's far more motivating as well, isn't it? I imagine if you're thinking, I'm doing this because I'm interested, not I'm doing this because I'm bad at something. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump back to an earlier question, because I think we've talked a lot about individual teachers a lot, but there was a question which came up earlier around institutional support, and I want to go back to a question Helen asked right near the start, which is, should schools and academies be responsible for supporting teachers' self-directed PD, and how can they do that?
Again, it depends on what you mean by supporting. A school could have a library, a school could have access to training videos or access to material which might be useful for teachers to engage in self-directed PD. On a next level, schools could facilitate professional development groups, literally coffee mornings or coffee afternoons or whatever, whether that's financially or whether that's with a room or with space or with whatever sort of structure, with a mentor, with a coach. And then further down, it's whether school is going to financially pay for conferences, books, or courses, or anything like that. And it depends on the focus of the school. It depends on a million different things. But there are tiers to the support which a school can offer, and I think good schools should offer, at least mid-range in there. Yeah.
I think also, Helen, one of the things that we hoped to do, rather ambitious goal with this, is that we would like to encourage schools to broaden their notion of PD and also encourage and support self-directed PD. Now, we don't expect that change to happen overnight. We're starting a conversation essentially with this paper, and we hope that other people at different levels in the ecology in their own settings will say, we've read this paper from OEP, they've started talking about this, we'd like to pick that up. How does that apply to us? And maybe that, they then start to officially recognize a whole range of self-directed PD options. So, we don't by any means consider ourselves the final absolute authority on this, but what this paper should do is open a conversation and open some reflection and discussion across ELT about what PD is, and how it is best utilized and how it can be officially recognized. Because I think a lot of the comments that I've been reading is also people saying, I'm doing all this stuff, but nobody pays any attention to it. I'm not getting any recognition for it. And that's something that we hope that this will trigger a conversation of change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something which Cal had asked, should I be expected to be rewarded or recognized for my self-directed PD? And I think in a lot of schools, this doesn't get enough recognition. And I think one of the things which institutions can do if they want to give teachers more autonomy and more choice is making them stakeholders and giving them a voice in how PD is done and what support is provided.
Yeah, but it really just depends. Like, we've got context from all over the world. It depends on what the institutional priorities are. It depends on the context, whether it's financial or whatever. So this is the start of a conversation, which hopefully will open up a lot for other contexts, but it's very much the start, I think.
I think so. I think these are elements to take on board and have conversations about. I think we're coming close to the end, but there's one or two more questions I wanted to jump to. One of which is quite big and abstract, and I'm not sure what you guys think about it.
It's for Sarah, I think, that question.
So it's very forward-looking. It's asking what challenges are ahead for teachers as professional development is concerned in ELT. So quite a broad, future-focused question, I think.
Oh, Frida, that's a lovely question. Chris, do you want to start, or shall I start?
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, I'm going to do a little tiny bit, I think. Again, and I have said it to everyone, it depends on the context. I mean, some people are encountering these 21st century skills challenging. Some teachers are encountering institutional issues. Some teachers are encountering cultural issues. We've got quite of a broad range, a broad spectrum. Potentially one of the big changes, I think, or big challenges in English language learning, I think, is the growth of World English and the concept that received pronunciation and British English as we know it is it changing in some way? Are we moving towards something which might be more descriptive than prescriptive, which I think is a danger or an opportunity, and what that's going to mean for teachers in their context in terms of, what grammar structures are they going to be teaching if certain ones are not as common as other, we look at reported speech, for example, and its role in the long-term future of how important it is in learning a language. So I do think the teachers are going to have to be a little bit more fluid, perhaps, in gatekeeping what is acceptable language. If we're thinking of, we say you should speak like that, but actually even the president and the prime minister are speaking in a slightly different way because it's not the way English particularly sounds anymore. So I think that's a challenge which is going to affect all of us, and I think it's obviously going to be big for the teachers. I don't know. That was quite big, Sarah. Sorry.
Well, we're doing big. It's a big question that Frida asked. Yeah. Big responses are okay. I suppose challenge. I hate to sound twee, and it is a bit sort of cliched, but challenges are opportunities. So I think some of the things that we will face is everything changes. So nothing stays the same. So, Chris has just talked about language change, language status change, and the languages we're expected to teach, the type of languages changes, curriculum changes. Somebody talked about that earlier. If I had to make a prediction, I do think that the role of global skills in language teaching is going to be a big issue. So if you look at most global curricula contain global skills as transversal competencies. So these are things that teachers of all subjects are expected to teach, whether it's digital literacy, creativity, critical thinking, eco-literacy, well-being literacy, and so on. So I think finding ways to do that sustainably for teachers in the long term, I think is going to be one of the things that we have to engage with. In some settings, they're already working very hard on that. We've got the paper out with AUP on global skills teaching. But I think finding how to adapt that to different levels of English in different contexts with different resources and different, educational goals, that's going to be quite a challenge. But I actually also think that teaching these global skills is incredibly motivating for learners and very motivating for teachers, because they're getting a double whammy. They're not only learning English, they're actually learning some other fantastic skills that are relevant for life, not just in the classroom, but also beyond the classroom. So I think that's actually a great opportunity for English language teaching, but is going to require some changes in the coming years.
If we talk about finally about more positives as well, I think COVID has opened up a world of resources and communities, which is going to be massively beneficial, I think, moving forward. We've got certain things which we wouldn't really thought about before COVID, but now are the norm. There's a lot more webinars, a lot more shared resource, a lot more things like this. So that's positive, I suppose.
And I think it's really interesting to see how hybrid teaching hasn't gone away. It's still sticking about, and it's interesting to see how these changes are happening over time.
Super.
I think we're going to have to wrap up in a moment. Were you going to jump in there, Sarah?
I was, but I'm just pretend you didn't see it.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up, I did just want to highlight again. There are some really great comments here. Some people have some really interesting thoughts. Chris has noticed a parallel when we were talking about institutions and institutional support. There's a parallel with asking students about their learning out of class, and how course directors could equally ask teachers what they have done to support their development. So very much about starting those conversations with teachers in the classroom, and it not just being about telling teachers what PD to do, it being a two-way conversation. There was another really interesting point about how Annalyn, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, was really motivated to be more focused on her PD, not for personal reasons, but doing it for learners to engage with new knowledge, opportunities, etc. So it's really great to hear everyone having these thoughts and everyone thinking about their different motivations and reasons for doing PD, and how there is such this diversity of ideas. Honestly, there are so many comments and questions here which I really want to get to, but I think we're probably going to have to wrap up now, because I imagine you two have places to be. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for all your comments. This has been a really, really fun, really busy live stream, actually. Yeah. Really great to have you all involved.
But it just goes to show what amazing resources teachers are. Look at all the fantastic comments. Look how great it is, all the ideas they've got, all the sort of critical thinking. I mean, just how great to get teachers to share that with each other. Thank you, Samir. You've been a great contributor as well. Thank you.
Really, really great to have you all involved. And yeah, what I would say is we'll try and get to some of these additional questions in the comments. There's loads of you. Very sorry if we didn't get to your question. What I would say is in the meantime, if we didn't get your question, chances are we may have addressed it in the paper. So do download that. I know there was a question earlier about action research, and we have in our professional development resources, which I posted a link to earlier, Oxford Professional Development Resources. There's a resource on action research, so you can take a look at that. So what I would say is, yeah, if you want to get any questions answered, download the paper or take a look at our other PD resources. And we'll have more on this topic. As Chris and Sarah said before, this is very much the beginning. I know at LTalk in December we have a talk on this. We have several talks on the same topic. So
I think myself and Donald are talking on the same topic.
You are, aren't you? Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good. So yeah, come along to that. Watch this space. If you want more support, download our paper, attend LTalk. It'll give you everything you need. So yeah, thank you all for joining us. Chris and Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Chris, and thanks everybody.
Did you two have any final thoughts or anything before I take us out?
Oh, I'm still just bamboozled by the quantity of questions. I was trying to read through them. But as you said, it shows the appetite for it, and the fact that this conversation started now. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. So yes, just to everyone in the audience, thanks again for joining us. If you liked this live session today, make sure you like it. If you love the live session, make sure you love it. And please do share it as well. If you know any teachers that need this sort of support, then do tag them in the comments, get them to join, and get them involved in the conversation as well. I find it's always great when you come to these events to make sure that you're bringing colleagues with you, so that afterwards you can talk and you can reflect. So yeah, do share this with your colleagues, and it really does help us out too. We also want to make these sessions all about you, our teaching community. So, if you have anything you'd like to us to talk about next, do comment and let us know. And we're always reading the comments and making sure our next event is based on what you guys want. And finally, make sure you're following us as well, so you don't miss any of the sessions we've got coming up. We're at OUP-ELT Global, at OUP-ELT Global on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I believe LinkedIn as well. So yeah, do join and follow along, and I'm sure we'll have loads for you in the future. And just one final mention, if anyone hasn't heard us talk about it before, the link to the paper is down in the comments if you want to download that. So that's everything from me. Last but not least, Chris and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really great having you.
It's been lovely to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
Take care. Thanks, Chris.
I'm learning a lot. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Bye.